Okay, today I tried to bridge between what our task invites us to do and to go back and to imagine something called strategic alliances. So I'm trying to move to chapter 7. Usually chapter 7 would come first. And in your task, there are definitely some marketing elements to it. And so I'm going to try to take that marketing elements using this Ansoff matrix idea on how to enter markets in terms of marketing strategy, and then move towards what kind of strategic alliances. Alliances means to set relationships that you're going to have to make when you go into a new environment. So this is just kind of a bridge between those two ideas. So I'll talk about that as we go. So Ansoff matrix has to do with the considerations of what your goals are when you enter a market, and that should be part of your recommendation in your project. So let me start, and then I'll tie it together with alliances a little bit, and then I'll talk about entry strategies.
And explain and briefly illustrate a really important model for marketing and business strategy. The model is called the Ansoff matrix. The Ansoff matrix is incredibly popular and well covered on business courses because it's a theoretical model, but really easy to understand and apply to such a variety of business situations. What it's essentially about is helping a business determine the right growth strategy. A strategy in terms of the products it chooses to sell and the markets in which it chooses to compete. So as you draw your grid and look at the 4 options which we're going to go through briefly, it's important to remember that this is all about choice. Business strategy is all about choice. So the 2 dimensions I mentioned, products and markets, but look at the yellow lines or yellow arrows there, because what's often forgotten about the Ansoff matrix is that as you move from the top left-hand corner, the choices a business makes in terms of its growth strategy involve, or usually involve, increasing degrees of risk. So that as you move towards the bottom right-hand corner of the grid, in theory, the choices you make involve the greatest risk. So okay.
And that's also true about your market entry strategies. The risk that you would have if you, I'll just give 2 broad examples and then I'll come back to it. But for example, let's say you just sell online and ship from wherever you're shipping from. It's relatively difficult, less profit, but low risk strategy. Your production is still here, you're not investing a lot of money into the new market. And then that would go up through hiring an importer, right? You're hiring someone who's going to work on the ground. They just order from you. They pay you. You ship. Low risk. Take that all the way to the far side, and you are investing in factories and plants and equipment with an unstable political situation maybe, or some other pest factor, economic, and or a social trend that you don't understand, and you go and you invest millions and hundreds of millions into building a factory and it doesn't work. That entry strategy is far more risky. Now, if you're successful, you can save a lot of money on cost, perhaps, and make a huge profit, but it's a risk-reward situation. And this is a little bit similar to that. So you're bringing in new, so this is products, you know, if you're bringing in a new product that the new market doesn't know, there's obviously more risk. Or if you're trying to create a new market that doesn't exist, then there's obviously more risk than working within an existing market form.
Come back to that as we look at the 4 elements of the Ansoff matrix. The first of them is called market penetration. This is where the business sells existing products to existing markets. The second is called product development. This is where the business increases the risk somewhat by introducing new products but trying to sell them to existing markets and customers. The third part of the Ansoff matrix is called market development. This is where the business decides to use its existing products but tries to find new customers for them in new markets. And lastly, the famous fourth part of the grid, the bottom right, which in theory is the riskiest of the 4 options, is called diversification, where a business tries to sell new products into new markets. And that's what...
Let me just highlight something real quick. So, market penetration. You know the product, there's already a bubble tea market, you're a bubble tea shop. You need to take market share from someone else. That's what you're doing, penetrating the market. That means taking someone's market share. Okay, let's say bubble tea doesn't exist, or you know, some other form of it. If it didn't exist and you were a bubble tea shop, you would have to develop a market. You would focus on getting people interested in the product, not your brand. It's not so important yet. It's like, hey, it's pizza. Try pizza. You might like it. Everybody loves pizza all around the world. I bet you would too. Pizza. Yeah, we make pizza. Pizza. Pizza beats pizza. Focus on pizza. Here we have an existing market, and then we have a new product, so we're going to be the first one to... Everybody knows pizza, but they don't know seafood pizza. So now I'm going to highlight my product differentiation. I'm going to differentiate my product. I'm going to show off my features and benefits that are different from other pizzas. So that's my strategy, right? In that situation, I either have a strategy to get people interested in the product, I'm sorry, the market, open the market up for a new product, or I have to show differentiation between my product and others. Okay, so in market penetration, of course, you know, you're doing more of your brand building and trying to establish how many, you know, distribution channels you can, you know, to understand your competitors. Here you realize that you do have a new product. You actually have, you're not the same, and trying to figure out how to have some small competitive advantage. You're introducing something new that people aren't sure yet about, but they know pizza, but they don't know your kind. And then diversification, the word there can be used in different ways, but the main point is that you're totally created something new for this market that they didn't have before and that you don't even use in your home market. You thought it would be appropriate for this market. Based on your research, you saw something new and you're going for it. But it's also a new market and new product, so it has the highest risk.
By looking at the yellow arrows of risk, diversification is usually identified as the riskiest of the 4 options in the Ansoff matrix. Before we look at each of those 4 things just briefly, it's also worth remembering that this model of market choice, market growth strategy, is not an either-or model. A business doesn't just decide to adopt a strategy of market development and therefore it's not able to adopt a product development strategy. A business can do all 4 of these things if it wishes. This is about assessing the relative risk of those choices. So let's look very briefly at market penetration, explain what it is, and look at a couple of examples. So we've mentioned this is top left of the matrix, selling existing products into existing markets. And really this should be the safety first core strategy, shouldn't it, for most businesses. Can we sell as many products as possible from our existing product range to both our existing customers and also customers who share the same needs and wants as our existing customers. We're selling to a well-defined and well-understood customer base. And strategically, the aim of a market penetration strategy is usually to maximise and ideally increase the market share of the business. Lots of different ways of doing that, for example, by opening new locations, by adding to, widening the range of the products and services that form the existing portfolio. Also, can you find ways of getting existing customers to simply buy more? Because it's often said that the best customers of the business are your loyal existing customers. You just need to ask them to buy more, and they often will. So we can see, I'm sure you've come across lots of examples of market penetration strategies. Essentially, any example where a business is trying to build its existing market share in an existing market with existing products. So 2 on the screen there, great examples. And often market penetration strategies are associated with this concept called organic growth. Aldi trying to build its market share of the UK discount grocery market by opening as many similar stores in suitable locations.
Alright, so just to bring it to what we're going to talk about in a little bit, Aldi. Aldi is a supermarket chain that is in, I believe they're in Italy, and they are opening in England. They're opening their own shops, they're investing their own money. It's a huge investment. So that's an entrance strategy, is to put your own profits in. Maybe they have, I don't know, some kind of publicly traded company, so they invest, they have capital investment from that. But they're building their own stores, so that's one entrance strategy. Another example is Domino's here. In Domino's, you know, they're saying that their effective innovation, at least for a pizza market at first, for some countries, is their e-commerce strategy, their apps, their ordering system. But they might franchise. Franchise is another model of entering a market. So franchising, we talked about before, but we'll come back to it. That means that you're accepting, like, Aldi has more risk. They're investing in building their own stores. Franchise has less risk. So talking about risk in general. But we'll come back and I'll do a whole thing about how the safest strategy to the most risky.
Around the UK. And of course, Domino's Pizza, a classic organic growth strategy, the classic market penetration strategy, aiming to have over 2,000 outlets in the UK. And a wonderful example too of how to use technological change such as e-commerce to support a market penetration strategy. Now, is market penetration the right strategy for a business? Well, of course, you can see why it's the lowest risk, because in theory the business is selling to markets and customers that it knows really well. It should have some really good insights into what customers need and want. It should understand what competitors are doing. It's unlikely to have to spend a huge amount on new product development and market research. It should really know exactly what it's doing in that market. But the question, as always with market penetration, is that market growing fast enough in order for the business to achieve its growth objectives? Is something different required in order to achieve the objectives? So could it be product development? Product development is the strategy where we are selling into our existing markets, target customers, but we're trying to introduce something new for them. We're trying to broaden our product range by researching, developing and introducing and launching new products to our core target audience. Lots and lots of examples of how businesses try to grow using new product development. And for example, we've seen Dyson. Dyson have moved very quickly and invested very heavily, moving away from their traditional vacuum cleaner to robotic vacuum cleaners, essentially targeting the same consumer, but after having invested massively in product development. And brand extensions, product extensions, are a great example of the ANSOF matrix, the product development strategy in action. Is this the right strategy for a business? In massively in product?
Coca-Cola, are they going to use Coca-Cola? They're going to enter a new market, or if they were, which they're already in every market, but if they were, you were a soft drink, or maybe an energy drink, if that was one of your ideas for your project, you would want to use distribution systems. So you would probably, unless you were producing it in Vietnam, which is another strategy, you would produce it wherever you produce it and then find a distribution company in Vietnam to distribute it to supermarkets or convenience stores for you. So that's what they would do as an entry strategy. Technological innovation. Again, you have to decide which kind of, maybe you'll find a way to license the product to a local electronics shop or maybe Chalone, some kind of company that but you know, depends on how cutting edge it is. Nguyen Kim, I don't know. Maybe you'll make an alliance with one company for distribution and sales. If it's a full promotion product, if it's something that people are going to want to demand anyway, like a, you know, whatever, early smartphone, for example.
The development. And brand extensions, product extensions are a great example of the ANSOF matrix, the product development strategy in action. Is this the right strategy for a business? Well, again, it's often said that product development is the natural ally of market penetration. If you can sell existing products to existing customers and also keep those customers happy by offering new variations and new experiences, new services, then it can add significantly to your revenues and to your profit. Of course, the key is market research. It's understanding what those new products need to be, responding to changing customer needs and tastes and wants, and ideally allying innovation, investment in innovation and product development with your existing customer base, who should be responsive to innovative products. It's often said, though, that for new product development, the most important thing is to be first to market, to gain the first mover advantages before your competition copy your idea and get to your own customers. Now, market development is moving now down to the bottom left-hand side of the grid. This is where the business seeks to sell its existing products, but not to existing customers. They're looking to expand into new markets, new customers, as well as potentially new geographical markets. So market development can be one or more of these strategies. It could be, for example, trying to expand into international markets by extending the geographical reach of the sales. Emerging markets being a great example of that, so exporting to the faster growing economies like China.
Focus here is new customers. So when you go into a market and you offer some kind of 2-for-1 pizza and you make it into like a family meal, then you change the way people think about, or you introduce, it's not just changing, but you introduce how people understand the product as some kind of social product, and then they'll stick with that. So you've got to show customers how to use your product. New customers in different segments, different pricing, so they understand the value. You have to establish what the value of it is. So there's a lot happening there when you're making a new market. You're the first one, so they have to understand, you know, they see, you know, maybe you take a food that people like to eat together, like a hot pot, some kind of hot pot. How much is a hot pot? Don't ask me. But if it's 200,000, then the pizza, if it's something that people are going to share, then maybe it's also should be 200,000, right? You can look at the market and look at the pricing of different things that are similar. Pizza gets eaten very quickly. That's the thing about pizza. You don't have a lot of, you don't have to lift it, you know, go into the bowl and serve it and do all this and make sure there's enough noodles and put the water on top of the noodles and play with the chopsticks or whatever. You just stuff it in your face. So it doesn't last long enough. That's the thing with pizza.
In Brazil. But market development can also be finding new customers and a different customer base by using new distribution channels. So, for example, it may well be that through e-commerce you're able to access quite a different type of customer base who have different needs and wants, but maybe they still want your existing product. And of course, it could be that you're simply trying to reach out to a different market segment from your traditional customer base, perhaps moving up market from a discount position to trying to attract or succeed in a premium market. So lots of examples of market development strategies, and of course, as these involve more risk, not all of them have been successful. I'm a big fan of Starbucks as a great case study of market development. Of course, it's expanded globally, but its success in...
All right, why is Starbucks a market development? It's market development because people didn't really look at coffee as like this high-end kind of situation. It's almost like a bar now, you know, like you hang out in your local neighborhood cafe. It's a social meeting point as well. You had elements of that with like Highland Coffee, but you also didn't have a price point where people were so comfortable to pay that. And to take the market a little bit higher. I guess it helps other companies like Chongwei, who's also trying to try to move to a higher marketplace, a market position.
In China, well documented in many reviews and articles, but not every multinational has succeeded in China. In fact, many have failed. Starbucks is a classic example of a successful market development strategy by taking the existing Starbucks offer and tweaking it slightly to a process called localization in order to succeed in a new market. But it can go all disastrously wrong. One of the best examples is Tesco's attempt to enter the US market with its grocery offer, which it branded Fresh and Easy. And as it turned out, that was a disaster for Tesco shareholders because Tesco simply misunderstood the needs and wants of the grocery supermarket customer in the US market. So market development is an interesting strategy, and of course the key to it is to understand the logic, the strategic logic for pursuing it. For example, is it simply because your existing markets are slow growth, mature, maybe even declining in value, and you're forced into seeking new markets? Or is it a systematic attempt to enter much faster growing international markets, which is a perfectly rational strategy for a business that has ambitions to be a multinational business? The key thing to remember though is you're trying to sell existing products. So the question mark for this strategy is usually around whether that product meets the needs and wants of the customers in the target market. And we see lots of examples of where businesses believe they can export successfully, but actually their product is not what's required by the target market. Which brings us on briefly, we're only going to touch on this briefly because we'll do this in a separate video, to the strategy called diversification, which, as we remember from the grid, is bottom right, selling new products into new markets. And if you remember the yellow arrows of risk, this should be the highest risk strategy. Lots of examples out there of businesses that are highly diversified and highly successful. So, as we'll see in the later video, it's not necessarily the case that the strategy of diversification is high risk and therefore bound to be a failure. Alphabet is perhaps one of the best examples of a highly diversified and successful business.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's Google. I don't know. Are there better examples of this? I mean, we have Procter & Gamble. They're huge companies. I wouldn't spend too much time on diversification for right now because you don't have to do that. Okay, so that one is okay. I think that one is a pretty good video, the Ansoff Matrix. And then we have this one, which is worth highlighting.
We live in strange times. The housing bubble.
Hi there. Let's take a quick look at the...
Okay, so in this case, I'm not really going to jump into Chapter 7 completely right now. I'm just going to highlight what it's going to be about. So, a strategic alliance means that you make a partnership of some sort with someone who's in the other market, right? So if someone's coming to Vietnam, there are import-export companies There are distribution companies. There are businesses that already do or sell similar products to yours. There are investors in the country who are looking for some kind of opportunity to maybe use your branding. There are companies that are looking to work on projects with other companies from other countries, like the subway. It's called a joint venture. There are local companies that could be taken over and repurposed and used, their distribution and factory systems could be used in ways that are not, beer companies come here and they buy breweries and then they brew Heineken in Vietnam and they basically run the beer company. So you can buy a company. You can take two companies you can take companies from different countries and put them and make them into one bigger international company, which is called a merger. An acquisition is when one company takes over another company. You can, so I'll just start with that. And then, okay, so then within those choices of which kind of model you're going to use, you have the same needs. You have your production and of course your resource acquisition that comes before the production. You have to find a way to distribute that product and where consumers are and understand the market research behind that, which you may not have the expertise in, which you may not want to do. So I'm just saying, in order to function in that new market, you need to be able to, have a plan for each part of your operation: production, distribution, sales, in order, each part of that, so we'll start with raw materials, production, distribution, sales, wholesale, retail. So let's just start with that, right? So that whole chain there, so each part of it has to be accounted for. Either you're going to be able to do it, you're going to do it in partnership with someone else, or you're going to hire someone else to do it. So we've talked about outsourcing before. That's with employment, but you can license also. You can hire somebody to do something, or to sell for you, or you can pay them a fee to be your sales force. So each one of these strategies has to consider, so the whole thing. If you look at it, it's called integration, right? The whole system is called integration. We have vertical integration. Vertical integration is any step that goes from resource production, getting resources to produce, then your production, distribution, wholesale, retail to customer. So anything that happens within that, sometimes it's better for you to own. Like if you're Chung Nguyen, you want to own the farm. Okay, so now you control the resources for your beans, and you have the production, and you have the shop, and you have the sales. That's a fully vertically integrated company. Is that of interest to you when you go into a new market? It's possible. It's a reason why you might want to make an alliance with another company. It gives you some justification for making that choice. That's called vertical integration. So we can look at Phuc Long. Phuc Long used to just sell coffee beans, and now they have shops. So they're like, okay, we don't want to sell beans to shops anymore. We're going to open our own cafes. We're going to sell from our own, system. So they're trying to take a greater control of their production and distribution chain. That's called vertical integration. Horizontal integration is when you just eat the competitor. You're like, oh, I want to go to a new market, and the best thing for me to do is, let's find a weaker, bigger, like the weakest one who has the most market share. Kindo. Kindo would be an example in Vietnam. A foreign company comes in and says, we want to eat them, we're going to rebrand Kindo and change their strategy, and we know how to make them work better in that market. So that's called horizontal integration. If you start to buy your competitors because you want to have more, so if you want to have horizontal integration of retail, you buy all the other convenience stores until you have the whole market of convenience stores. If you wanted to have a horizontal integration of production, you would buy the factories that make all the shoes and try to control that whole part of the supply chain and the distribution chain. So anyway, those are two reasons why you make alliances. That's why I mentioned them. You make alliances to enter markets, you make alliances to control different parts of the supply and distribution chain. You also make alliances to get a bigger market share, which is horizontal integration. So there's three main things that you're trying to do there. And then you have the risk factors of entering the market. So you have risk that's very low, like I said. So you're gonna, I'll give some examples here, but I have an article which is better. So let's say here are some of the choices, right? You could export. So direct exporting, fairly low risk strategy, right? Most common, you just have something you want to sell, you give it to someone to sell in a new market, the exporter knows the market, so you don't have to really worry, they pay in advance, okay, payment doesn't come slow, it comes directly. Franchising, okay, so you can franchise your brand to someone, and okay, so there's more investment on your part because you're responsible for the brand image, you're responsible for the quality control basically, and that they do things right, but you assume that they have local knowledge that's going to help them to pick the right location and to be successful in that market. So you're depending on them, they're investing mostly their money, so your risk is quite low. Another way of entering a new market is to make a partnership. That's, you know, there's all kinds of partnerships, which I'll talk about next video. Partnerships from acquisitions, to mergers, to joint ventures, to outsourcing, to all kinds of different ways that you can partner up. Buying a company, just buying a company, acquisition, that's what that's called. You have an immediate market share when you do that right away. You have legal issues. Are you allowed to buy a company? Is a foreign, in many countries, like Vietnam, I think, a foreign company is not allowed to own a controlling percentage of a local company. I think that's changing, but it was like that. If you're in Cambodia, they had an advantage for business for a while because you could just own a company 100% if you were a foreigner. You have all the risk, but you can own it and make decisions and have freedom. Build something, you know, come in, build a factory, foreign direct investment, most risky, but biggest reward. And it gives you advantages over your competitors in the future. So piggybacking means that you go on someone else's products and you help add to their diversify what the product choices they're selling. And then licensing. Licensing is when you say, okay, you will be the exclusive dealer of our products in that country. So we'll give you a license in Vietnam to sell. They did it with iPhones, right? There used to be actually no official licensed dealer of iPhones up until iPhone 5 or 6. Very strange, you know, you had to import them in various ways without actually having someone responsible. Because they also didn't have responsibility for warranties or any support and repairs that the phones would need. You would just go to like a local weird phone shop and they would know how to crack open the, you know, the iPhones. But Apple wanted a lot of control, and maybe there was no company they felt like they could control. So I'm going to show this video real quick. It's only 5 minutes and we'll be done for today. This is entry strategies, and I'll go into this in detail next week.
Four main methods a business can use to enter and trade in international markets. Now we're going to go through these four step by step and just pick out some of the potential benefits and drawbacks of using one or more of these methods. You may want to pause the video as you go to jot a few ideas down to add to your notes. Let's start with exporting, which is selling direct goods and services direct to your customers in international markets. And it's huge. I mean, the UK, like many developed economies, is a major exporter of goods, physical products and services, over 620 billion in a recent year to March 2018. And as I say, pause the video as we go if you want to jot down some of the key benefits and drawbacks. I'll draw out the key points. With exporting, it's really well established, extremely well understood. A large percentage of UK firms export to international markets, increasingly small firms as well, particularly given the ability to use e-commerce, and also particularly if they're selling a service. It's relatively simple, relatively low.
So lots of good notes in here. I'll put the video up online so you can use it for your notes tonight.
A risk. And another benefit is that the business, by and large, keeps all the profit earned on exporting. There are some drawbacks, like every method of business, not the least potentially bureaucratic, depending on what you're selling. And of course, you've always got the risk of non-payment, but then you've got that risk whoever you sell to.
We're going to talk about that risk of non-payment later. We talk about export risk at the end of this chapter. But generally, if you set it up the right way, it's the lowest risk. People understand it very, very easily. It's the most, Vietnamese buyers and sellers, every single market, every single Cholong, every single Cho Ben Tan, every market is doing this, importing and exporting. Once you buy it, your profits are your own, there's no sharing. Everybody's pretty much in charge, especially the exporter. Your quality control is controlled by you before you export it, so you don't have to worry about your brand image. Of course, when they say bureaucratic, that means that there's issues with customs. Sometimes products are not allowed in the country for various reasons, so you have to know why or what kind of, you have to understand the system of how you can import and export in the country. Non-payment, if you don't do it right, you might not get paid. It's difficult, and this is what I was talking about with Apple, it's difficult for you to have after-sales service and also, monitor how people use your products and be able to support the users of your product. Tariffs, yeah, there may be other issues going on.
Just pick out the bottom one there, the drawbacks. Exporting can be affected by protectionism. So make the link to this idea of protectionism. Tariffs, quotas, non-tariff barriers like labels and quality regulations can be an issue for exporters. Let's move on to the second of the four methods, which is using agents and distributors. This is often the case that businesses move on to this stage once they've established a foothold in an international market, particularly where there are agents or distributors in key markets, and where those intermediaries, because don't forget an agent or a distributor is part of a distribution channel, particularly where they have a specialist market knowledge or a significant customer base that you want to tap into. So whilst you lose some of the profit margin, which you give to the agent or distributor, of course, because that's how they make their money, it can still be a fairly cost-effective way of increasing your sales into international markets. Not the least because the commission or the margin you lose is really a variable cost of doing business in those markets. So using agents and
okay, so the agent and distributor should have specialist knowledge, so they weren't necessarily ready with the iPhones for those people. They couldn't find anybody who had enough specialist knowledge, perhaps, in order for them to feel secure in opening that kind of distribution system and having an agent in Vietnam, so they just let it be like an underground product, you know, a secondary product. Can be cost effective. Commission or distributor margin is a variable cost, so you just, they mark up the cost per, you know, whoever's selling for you is adding to the cost. We know that the iPhone was more expensive in Vietnam anyway, so that was just a markup of people selling in this country, so it wasn't something that would be unexpected, and it's not your cost. Can help to control a little bit better the questions and answers that people have about the product and give support. So that's important. This can be a way to certify, to give customers some peace of mind that you're the real distributor, that you're the one who's really responsible for the product, and so they feel secure in that. Of course, some profit margin might be lost. If there's a question of commitment, effort, or exclusivity within the market, if the agent isn't really doing what they're supposed to say, then you really lose control. You don't really know how much quality of customer service is happening, and the distributor is the one who manages that relationship. Your customer is on the other side of the relationship from you.
Distributors can be a very effective way of growing your sales, in particular in key markets. You've got to be careful, of course, as to which agent and distributor you use to make sure that they're right for you, right for your business. And of course, you lose something of the customer relationship, because ultimately the customer is the relationship is with that agent and with the distributor rather than with you. Okay, we're halfway there. Let's go through to the third method of entering international markets, which is to open an operation overseas. And I put a picture on the screen there of one of the new and the many new campuses that UK schools and universities are building in emerging markets. There's a great example of actually opening an operation in an international market. The key benefit, of course, is that here you are able often to avoid protectionism. If you're actually operating a factory, case previously there was a school or some kind of operation in that international market, you may be able to avoid protectionist measures like tariffs and quotas. You're operating first-hand in the markets, dealing direct with customers, dealing direct with employees and suppliers. It's tough, but there are potentially significant benefits if you get it right. Clearly, though, the drawbacks are about risk. A significantly higher risk operating, you're running an operation overseas in terms not just of the financial cost, but also management time, and also the need to make sure that you are complying with the external environment, in particular local regulations, laws, and so on and so forth. And lastly, and probably you might argue, the highest risk method of entering international markets, if we're evaluating different options, this will be the higher risk end, which is entering into a joint venture, i.e. partnering with another business, or even buying another business overseas, an overseas takeover. And as with all external growth strategies like this, the issue is risk and reward. So you can imagine if you can identify a business in an international market that you want to buy or partner with, that's great, because it could potentially transform your operations in that market. However, as with all takeovers and joint ventures, it's all about the risk. Have you picked the right target? Do you really understand what you're doing? Are you paying too high a price? And what happens if things go wrong? However, there are lots of examples, in particular multinational businesses who've used joint ventures and takeovers as a way of accelerating their entry into international markets. There we go, then that's just a quick...
Okay, I think that's a good place to stop for today. I wish you guys a wonderful weekend, and I will try to Zoom us up maybe this afternoon. You won't see this video by then. But anyway, have a good weekend, and I don't know. whenever we're going to get back. Who knows? But have a nice weekend.